The way I see it is that Spike is like a swinging pendulum, where he is in a constant inner battle against his dragon nature and greed. Only when he is on both extreme sides of the pendulum does his innocence and kindness remain intact, but it's that grey middle ground where his greed begins to take over him. See, whenever he is in the presence of his closest friends, he strives to be helpful and kind, because he knows that's what his friends appreciate about him, and their presence reminds him of that fact. But on the other hand, whenever Spike is completely isolated from his friends and placed in a very alien environment, his innocence and kind nature also remains intact because everything around him is such a dire contrast to what he's been brought up to know. The best example of this is seen in Dragon Quest, where all the other dragons act completely different to what Spike is used to, and thus he ultimately comes across as effeminate and weak in the eyes of the teenage dragons. But, as I mentioned before, there is also a grey area where Spike is at his most vulnerable to greed. This seems to be whenever he is either alone or not surrounded by his closest friends, but has many benefits surrounding him that are too tempting to take. We see this in episodes like Secret of My Excess, where Spike goes overboard on taking advantage of people giving him gifts on his birthday, but only because Twilight is not constantly there to stop him from doing so. A similar thing happens in All's Well That Ends Well, when Spike is lonely but he instantly forgets his family once he finds the gem pile, but of course, once there is no more greed to be had, he reverts back to his innocent self, missing the company of his family. Spike's constant battle with his own greed presents a great undercurrent of tension throughout the series, especially considering the dangerous potential Spike has, but his ability to keep his dragon nature under control also promotes the power of friendship that MLP stands for. It's because of friendship's teachings and lessons that Spike, a dragon, has remained content and happy with his pony family. When you think about it, Celestia took a great risk in sending Spike to Ponyville, a place where he could easily be overtaken by greed or an evil force could steal him and use him for their own purposes. But now, in perspective of MLP as a show, Spike commonly fills the role of both the voice of reason as well as the comic relief, two roles which I believe to suit him perfectly. It's also here where I bring up the point that I think Spike actually helped a lot of bronies find such an attachment and interest within the show. When we look at Spike as a character, we see that he is the only main male cast member, as well as the only one that isn't a pony. These two very basic differences already allow him to stand out from the otherwise vibrant happy-go-lucky universe of MLP, aesthetically being a figure unlike any other in the show, and one that immediately grabbed my attention when I watched my first ever episode of MLP. I was initially very surprised to see a male character in such a prominent role at all, let alone a dragon character of all things, and honestly, it was Spike that initially kept my interest while watching my first ever episode. But then, the more I watched, the more I began to develop a relatable attachment to Spike, due to the fact that he would actually make very funny sarcastic comments about the events of the episode, almost speaking what the minds of mature audiences may be thinking. In a sense, through the guise of Spike, there are points where the writers are kind of taking a jab at their own show, making fun of the cliches and girly stereotypes that have plagued his previous generations. It's because of Spike's unique perspective of things, I think, that allowed mature audiences to find the show initially entertaining and comforted by the fact that there was a character who would think similar things as themselves. A character that would think more level-headed and not be completely indulged in the bright, magical, optimist realm of the show. I'll be honest, I still crack up when I see Spike saying the "Ness needs to be condemned" line or the "Dude, that's creepy" line. They're really not lines you would expect to see in a show called My Little Pony, but somehow Spike manages to make them work while keeping the overall innocence of the show intact. In some ways, I guess you could say that Spike acts kinda like a metaphor for the Brony community. Just like he helped Twilight to accept and embrace the friendship of Ponyville, I think in a lot of ways, more than we realise, Spike may have indirectly helped mature audiences like us come to embrace and accept MLP as a fun, well-made show that could appeal to us just as much as it could appeal to its intended demographic. Another reason why Spike just works so well in the show is that his character is one that's unique enough to use in order to convey certain lessons and messages that just wouldn't really work as well with other characters. Because his past is such a mystery and he's a completely different species to the rest of the main cast, his lessons about self-discovery, embracing who you are, not what you are, believing in your skills and accepting that not every debt has to be repaid are all great lessons that only work especially well for Spike. Not only that, but his character also brings more interesting twists to already established messages. Yes, the message of All's Well That Ends Well is about jealousy, which was done before in Green Isn't Your Colour, but when Spike is put into the equation, the jealousy becomes a very different personal matter, mainly for the fact that it isn't just a dream or goal that's being threatened, it's his sense of purpose and a way of living that's put at risk, as well as a friendship that was built up from the very beginning, showcasing not only a lesson of jealousy but also one of insecurity and sensitivity, both for Spike for being jealous and for Twilight for not taking Spike's views seriously. The same applies to Inspiration Manifestation, which while on the surface is, yes, another honesty message, it again becomes more complex in relation to the Spike-Rarity relationship, a relationship built up since the very first episode, which adds a lot more weight to Spike being at risk of ruining his relationship by telling Rarity the truth. It is somewhat selfish of Spike, and he is at fault, but it's also a very relatable situation, and we know just how sensitive Spike is, and especially how close he feels to his friends and his dependence upon them. Spike is not perfect. Furthermore, a reason to like him more. As I've described, there are many things to admire about him, but I've also highlighted some of his flaws, and it makes him a better character for it because he does have issues that he needs to overcome, and there are big steps he can still make towards maturity and independence. I mean, since Celestia had planned Twilight to be a powerful princess from the beginning, I wonder what plans she has for Spike. We still don't know where he came from exactly, and Celestia clearly sent him off to live with Twilight for a reason. I think there are a lot of things still waiting for Spike, and I think there is a lot of potential for his role to grow considerably more. Because, even though he is a great supporting character, I also think that Spike works wonderfully on his own. Yes, his greatest strengths do reside with his passion to help and support others, but I think that his upbringing with Twilight has also taught him some valuable lessons of independence, and I think we have begun to see a more mature side of Spike in recent years. I mean, really, it's no surprise, seeing as for the majority of the time Spike is observing and literally writing down all the lessons the main six learn about friendship. And now we can see him starting to indulge in his own passions and interests in life. He clearly has a love for baking and cooking, as well as now an interest in comic books, but now he also actually starts to take a more authoritative role when in the presence of the pets, or the CMC, which reflects excellently on the examples of leadership that Twilight has set for him, and I would love to see this side of Spike develop further. He temporarily raised Pee-wee and even has to attend to royal duties in Canterlot. He is and I think always will be a faithful friend and assistant, which he is very happy to be, but he is also beginning to understand the importances of responsibility and embracing himself. As we've seen in the recent series, he displays a very mature attitude to when Rarity, a pony he loves, is falling head over heels over someone else. Yet Spike still does his best to try and help her in her attempts to win the heart of Trenderhoof. True, you could argue that he is used to Rarity obsessing over celebrities at this point, but he is still supportive throughout nonetheless. I also think that since Rarity told him that he should never be afraid to tell her the truth, that Spike will now start to actually really adore and love Rarity more for who she is, and not just give out false praise for the sake of giving out constant praise, which I think will ultimately make their relationship that much stronger. Well, I guess since I stepped upon it, that I should talk about the relationship between Spike and Rarity. Honestly, I absolutely adore it. I think it's one of the main reasons why I got into the show in the first place, and honestly one of the main reasons why I keep watching. The relationship offers something not really found anywhere else in the show, at least not amongst the main cast, so I'd love to see more developments in their relationship. What started out as a simple crush really has evolved into something truly unique that can still be expanded further. As episodes like Inspiration and Manifestation have shown, there are still new directions for their relationship to take. It's a relationship that I can get down with because, given Spike being a different species and an age that's not exactly specific, I can imagine the two of them actually getting together in the future. Now, of course, I don't think they will become ever increasingly more intimate on the show, but the occasional acknowledgement of Rarity's fondness for Spike and Spike's fondness for her is always appreciated, and can still be developed in a heartwarming fashion without becoming too intimate. So, what would I like to see in the future for Spike? Well, like I said at the start of this video, I think Spike's been a bit underused as of late, which I find to be a bit of a shame. Now, of course, I do acknowledge that he has had some great moments this season, specifically in the last quarter or so, but I also feel like there is so much more for him, and that whereas in the past Spike would play a lot of prominent roles in episodes not centered around him, now Spike seems to often be shoved to the side or not given much to do, which disappoints me because it seems like the writers don't know what to do with him, whereas I see so much potential for him. Also, while I understand his uses for comic relief and why he doesn't always need recognition, it's the consistency of Spike being a comedy punching bag and being ignored without any kind of balance that troubles me. I really hope that the writers continue to develop Spike more in the next seasons, and that they continually give him bigger and greater roles to fulfill. He's a very important character to the show, and I hope I've been able to show that, and just as much as I hope I've been able to show that he's important to the community as well. I'd love to see him develop more, get bigger roles, do more important things, overcome some of his flaws, interact with more ponies, maybe outside of just Twilight and Rarity. Well, at least I think so anyway. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm no master analyst, no master critic or writer, but I do have an opinion, which, while it is strictly mine, I felt it was one I needed to share. Thank you very much for watching, and please feel free to post your comments below. I know that many people will probably disagree with me, and that's fine, you're entitled to your own opinion, and I will gladly discuss and consider with you other views and insights. This has been the Peaceful Ponderer, wishing you all a pleasant day.